Once again, it's Thursday morning. We're at Sidney by the Sea Rotary Club in the beautiful Shoal Centre in Sidney, BC. As you will know, the instruction to myself as speaker seeker is to take our members attending, about 40 to 50 this morning, out of the room for a while and show them life from a different point of view. And Michael Peirone, the CEO of the Victoria Hand Project, did a brilliant job. Michael, it's your second time speaking to us. We recently did a couple of days ago, we did a recording with the district governor of Rotary, who is in Victoria this morning for the annual district meeting of District 5020. And he, as you might recall, spent quite a bit of time talking about Rotary and leadership. Well, I'll tell you what, the room was full of leaders today. Principal among whom was of this generation was Michael Peirone, and from the generation behind, a 16-year-old high school student who's going to be going to Ottawa to get a brief glimpse as to how the government of Canada works, and we'll talk to her a little bit later. But Michael, your presentation was stunning. You are a graduate engineer, biomedical engineer, who began your professional career with this organization and then went on to lead it. The need is huge. The solutions are based on modern technology that, of course, was not available for much of humanity. How do you match the technology with the volume of the need? But first, give our audience a little bit of a background on the Victoria Hand Project.
Wonderful. Yes. Thank you so much, John, and the Rotary Club Sidney by the Sea for having myself and my colleague Becky this morning. It's really great to share a little bit more about Victoria Hand Project. So we're a Canadian charity organization that makes low-cost prosthetic limbs by using 3D printing and other advanced technologies. Here in Victoria, we have a team of engineers, students, volunteers who help out with creating the designs for the prosthetic limbs, but the actual work of making the prosthetics is done overseas by our partners. So we have partners in places like Ukraine, Nepal, Egypt, Kenya, and in each of these communities, they have the 3D printers, 3D scanners, computer software, and they do the complete end-to-end process of working with the patient, producing the prosthetic device, and fitting it. So it's all about the transfer of knowledge and technology to areas that typically don't have access to these technologies.
How many countries have you worked in?
We've worked in 11 countries in the past decade.
Changing one life, one limb at a time. But the need is massive. And I guess one of my questions to you is, with the experience that your amazing project has developed over the years, are you sharing that experience, or how are you sharing that experience with, let's say, policymakers in the healthcare system in this country and beyond? For example, when the project in Nepal was partly at least supported by, I think, 7 Rotary clubs in Victoria. Are you able there in Nepal, for example, to facilitate your partner, the local partner who's actually making the limbs, to have an impact on public policy in this regard?
So that's a little difficult because in many of the areas that we work, there isn't really any government oversight on prosthetics. Mm-hmm. And this is typically because there's so many other healthcare needs in the country, and prosthetics, unfortunately, isn't at the top of the list. But that doesn't stop us from trying to approach the governments, working through our partners to show that this can be more of a sustainable, economical solution to providing prosthetics in the country. Most of these places don't have the means to actually make prosthetic devices, the main components of the prosthetic devices in country. But with our model, we're able to bring in, we call a microfactory into the country. to actually make all the components for making the prosthetics, rather than needing to purchase components from, Germany, Turkey, China, and shipping them in. They can just make everything right there, which reduces costs and timelines. So we hope with more evidence in the countries that we're working in, more people fit, that it can really inspire these governments to help support us further, which helps with the sustainability.
Well, Michael, you know that Rotary is a global organization, about 1.4 million members in X thousand clubs. And we work as individual clubs, as Rotary districts. You're at the district convention this weekend, and as a global organization in a number of areas of clear need. And what strikes me about the important work that you and your network of partners is doing, let's go back to the beginning of Polio Plus. I mean, we are almost at the end of that now. Polio was almost a dead letter. Why is it that Rotary was able to succeed where governments hadn't? And it was that it is a global organization that had mobilized nonpartisan, non-political medical intervention resources to bring to a desperate world what was a technological solution to polio. Mm-hmm. And we have the pattern. It can be done. And I just have to say that the power of your presentation this morning was in part the solutions which you have devised and deployed in 11 countries, but in part the magnitude of the issue that you're dealing with. It's stunning. And I hope that there's a way that as your project continues to grow, the resources flow, but the impact on public policy takes place, possibly even in this country. Yeah. What does the future look for the project? What are your immediate plans going forward?
Well, over the past few years, we've had much learning, whether it's in the design space, the logistics, and now we feel that through that, we've really created a model that can be placed in different areas of need. We've worked in South America, Central America, across Africa, Asia, and conflict zones and developing countries. And that's, everywhere has its different needs, its different ways of doing things. But we feel that, this model, we almost say it's like a franchise, because we have the equipment, the workflows, and we can go into a country and set it up, train them on the prosthetics, the production. We come back to Canada and then they're independently producing the prosthetics. So that could really allow us to scale to new areas of need. One of the big projects we have right now is in Ukraine, because there's unfortunately many people that have lost their limbs in the war. And we came in with a solution that allows them to make the prosthetics right there in Ukraine. They were facing issues with importing due to the war conditions and factories being destroyed. And we were able to set up in these cities, and now they're constantly producing the prosthetic arms. Mm-hmm. So that's what really inspires us to move forward and to look at other areas of need. One of the things that I touched on during my presentation was the work in Nepal, where we're talking about what we're calling hub and spoke model, where our partners in Kathmandu could 3D print the prosthetics and then send these out to clinics across the country. And that's one way to provide prosthetics in more areas of Nepal, but then that could also be more regional. We could work with our partners in Kenya, and then they could make prosthetics for Rwanda, for Tanzania, for Ethiopia. And it would really just expand access beyond just the local area that we're working in. So this is what we're working on right now. And our team, we are primarily engineers, so we can't help but just keep on refining the designs of the prosthetics and the software and the workflows. But it seems to be working for us because we're always coming up with new novel solutions for prosthetic care.
Just remind me again of the dimensions of the need for prosthetics.
Yes. The stats that we've heard is that 80% of amputees live in developing countries, yet only 5% of them have access to prosthetic care. So this means that there's more than 3 million people in need of a prosthetic that can't receive one.
And with one, their lives change
Yes.
immediately.
Yes.
And I think you mentioned the portion of the deemed need that's created by war and conflict.
Yes, there was one of the members of your club was mentioning that, and I think they said around a third, which would mean more than 1 million people unfortunately have lost limbs due to war and conflict. We've seen this in Ukraine. Cambodia is an area that we had previously worked in, and unfortunately, there's landmines that are still spread across the country, and we hear people still lose limbs to this day. And many other areas that unfortunately have been touched by war.
And well, the reach of your charity, and therefore actually the reach of the University of Victoria, particularly perhaps its Faculty of Applied Engineering, is much greater than most people would imagine. What's the relationship with UVic other than providing the talented, educated, dynamic leaders and members of your team? Because you've got several, I think, from UVic.
Yes. So this started as a research project at UVic in the Faculty of Engineering. It was more of an engineering question on can hands be made using 3D printing? And there were trials that were done in Guatemala, and the participants that got these hands asked to take them home at the end of the trials since they couldn't get their own prosthetic. And that inspired our founder, who's a professor of engineering at UVic, to spin it off into a not-for-profit, and then we became a charity. But we still have space at the University of Victoria. We still tap into many young leaders that are in engineering, in sciences, in social sciences that want to volunteer and give back. We have volunteers, co-ops. As you mentioned, I did my engineering degree at UVic. We have our mechanical engineer who is from UVic, and our founder is from UVic. And Becky, who you also met, she's from sciences, but she previously worked at UVic. So, even though we are a separate entity than UVic, we are still very intertwined. And, we say it's like a good symbiotic relationship. They give us space and some support, and then we can also train students on these new skills.
Well, it's proof positive of Richard Florida's research into creative communities. And if you read any of his writings, he looks at communities like Victoria, where there is a concentration of universities and colleges, because guess what? Good things happen when people are educated and all that. The only other thing I'd say is that there's a poetry in Victoria Hand Society springing out of the engineering faculty, because as you know, graduate engineers in Canada wear an iron ring on the small finger of their working hand. That tradition began when a bridge collapsed in Quebec in 1906. A beam was taken from that bridge, given to the Engineering Society of Canada from which to make rings for graduate engineers. And my late father wore his proudly. He graduated in 1935. I bought him a couple of rings. He wore them out. So to have the Victoria Hand Project be a global, significant engineering, healthcare, humanitarian project coming from the University of Victoria, it doesn't get better than that, for all the work that you and the worry and the energy that you all have to put into it. And how did Polio Plus start? It didn't start around the world. It started that we have the technology to defeat this disease. And the snowball began to grow. Michael, thank you and your colleagues for the work that you do. It was an inspirational presentation, you and Becky, this morning. It was terrific. And we wish you well, and we'll continue to support your work. It's just brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thank you.